Hi, Jace.
Hi,
Thank you so much for joining me.
it's lovely to be here tonight.
Yeah, I was so happy to receive your text message saying that you are ramping up to uh, interview to become a peer educator at Peer Connections.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great opportunity to affect the lives of other students.
Yeah, you've certainly helped me. You spent at least an hour of your time the very first time we met through our object-oriented design class this semester that is just a brutal class in terms of pace. But yes, I immediately saw an amazing peer educator in you, and I think I'd share that. And I didn't know you were actually in the process of applying to become one.
Yeah, I decided to become a peer educator or at least apply because I'm currently a CS grader, right, for the introduction to programming class here at SJSU. And the thing I've been struggling with a lot is how I'm only giving these like letter grades to students and trying to help them in a way to improve their programming, but there's no connection in like trying to help them with like mental health or trying to get them to connect it to each other. So the job has felt very draining, and I saw an opportunity with peer educators to do something more that actually connects people to each other.
Wow, you are very mature. You are very um, giving, and I am right with you in terms of that vision. I recognize so much of the roots of grading. Um, there's a dark history to that, right? In thinking about IQ scores, how they were invented, in thinking about the um, the gains and losses of when we assign grades in an arbitrary letter or a number to someone's potential. And in my mentor's words through his research, the anchor of grading is like dominance and control,
Mm-hmm.
so that the system can, you know, continue doing its thing and churn out human capital. But I get exactly what you mean. Like when we do that and we don't have conversations about well-being and overall health, it's really dehumanizing, right? Because we've been on the receiving end. We're in the receiving end of those grades on a
Mm-hmm.
weekly basis. And, you know, to be in that position where you are, where you're actually playing a role in that, it's no wonder that you feel this way.
Yeah, it's really hard, especially in the upper division courses, when you don't have a community, you don't have faces to names, um, to be able to perform how we're expected to. And there's a lot of expectation to be very much self-supporting and not rely on other people to be able to do our homework projects, especially in the object-oriented design class. I actually had to drop the course or trying to drop the course because there was such an emptiness in me just coming from this class that I couldn't push my, it would be a disservice to myself if I pushed myself to output what was needed for this class, right?
Yeah, when you shared that with me a week ago, um, one, I was slightly taken back because I saw the amount of work you put into the first project that we sort of collaborated on. Mainly, you literally tutored me for like over an hour on it, right? Um, it was, I mean, you can kind of speak to this. Like, what I saw was easily 10 hours of work, right? In addition to understanding um, the class, the material in the class. And it made a lot of assumptions on prerequisite knowledge, which I think made it really cognitively and emotionally demanding. Would you say so?
Definitely. I understand that we have to take certain classes before we do this class, but there was such a lack of guidance, especially when the first project, we haven't even learned half of the things we needed to know to complete the project. Our professor didn't break it up into chunks, right? We were doing the programming before the design for this project, which is kind of backwards considering what we're supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah. As a aspiring community college educator, when I think about the teachers that I've experienced and the teachers I have now, I forgive them immediately because I think they are given a curriculum that sets them up for failure. And they're given way too many students to really address individual learning needs of those students. But I'm with you. I'm really struggling in that class. And I'm taking like a dozen CS classes. I went into the office hours of this professor, and the one thing she kind of said was basically like, what did I hear when she was communicating to start early? And I actually do remember her saying that, right? Like we had a fairly generous deadline, but it was a really massive project that made humongous assumptions on our prerequisite knowledge because the lecture was the design part or the theory. It didn't talk at all about the implementation, right? Um, and it's just, so much is lost. Hearing you say that you were changing your major, like that CS department lost a bit of genius, right? That is Jace Chang. and and I'd love to hear a little bit about your vision for your future and your future studies and vision for yourself.
Yeah, so starting from more towards the beginning, I applied to college as a CS major because the visions I had, I didn't understand where I could go with them. So I chose CS because I took an intro class and learned a little bit of coding, and I was kind of good at it, or at least I thought I was good at it. So I applied as a CS major and got in here. I took the introductory courses and I was able to pass the first class simply because I knew Python. And that class did not prepare me at all for the next class. I essentially self-taught myself. And then when it came to intro to data structures, I started to find myself wondering what kind of future do I see myself with CS? I don't want to work at Google. I don't want to work at Amazon or Facebook. I don't want to be a cog in a wheel just turning out products that don't benefit like humanity, right? So I was helping a friend through a really hard time with a rehousing crisis, and they needed a lot of help. So I basically went to a lot of meetings with them, and I also directed them to like SJSU Cares. I directed them to CAPS drop-in hours. I basically managed their case for them in a tertiary kind of way, getting them to the resources that could direct them ultimately to the help they actually needed. And at some point, a CAPS counselor told me, it's like, hey, Jace, it's like you're a case manager for your friend. And I kind of had an epiphany. I was like, oh, I could be doing this as a job because the people I was directing my friend to were case managers. So I started thinking, well, if I don't enjoy the classes for CS and I don't see a future for myself in CS, I can do something different. And I switched to sociology specifically instead of psychology because it has a community oriented focus. And the lacking thing in psychology is we don't understand systems of people. And that's the biggest thing that we need to understand. Especially when it comes to CS, we see the lack of it. I'm still staying in like servers for the younger kids I'm grading for. And I've been trying to reach out to them about resources on campus because I want to approach their success holistically. So making sure I talk to them one-on-one, get them the help they need, ask them what kind of support they need. And I've been just leaving kind of communication channels open for them to communicate with me. And ultimately, I want to become a case manager at a university and also do community mental health counseling. So I've been really trying to gear up for that by participating in programs like Peers in Pride mentors. So I'm a mentor for future LGBTQ plus students as a transitional program. And also I'm a mental health ambassador on campus. So it's my job to connect people to resources. And essentially I've just found roles for me to take up for things I've already been doing. So that's kind of how I've came from CS to sociology and what I plan to do in the future.
I so admire your vision. I think there's so much in your story where that kind of came about, and how that really, kind of blossomed into the vision and what you just shared with us here. Yeah, I mean, at one point I would love to ask you like what community really means to you, right? And like straight up, I can say after having been a peer educator for 6+ years now, like consecutive 6 years, so much of the decline and anxiety around mental health could be reduced if the expected graduation time was not 4 years, but rather 6. If the curriculum or COR, so to speak, that many of our professors are required to teach was cut in half, right? Imagine how deep we can go in some of these courses that we're taking, right? Not only cut in half, like really have each class be catered towards some of the larger horizons of focus that all of our students kind of innately have, right? Like we kind of generally have a feeling of who we want to become and where we want to go. And even if we don't, I don't think we can outsource that to the career center. Just like how if you're working with a student right now who clearly has large pain points in their overall wellness due to their academics, I think it's unjust to say, well, like literally only if you were to just be like, there are psych services for you, right? I think you'd engage in some type of dialogue to learn a little bit more before you do that, depending on the time, depending on who it is. But yeah, why don't we at this moment speak a little bit about, because right before we started recording, we were imagining a brighter future in our object-oriented design class where we can have more of a community and we won't feel so alone. The feeling of feeling alone is present, omnipresent in every STEM class I take. And we were chatting how, group work, learning teams is not the magic bullet, but I don't think that means we should give up on those ideas completely, right? So why don't I actually share a minute of a podcast and then you can reflect on what you hear, okay? Yeah, trying new things. So this is Seth Godin's podcast. He talks a lot about learning and some of the deficiencies in the educational system. So let me go ahead and play it. This is one of his students giving an anecdote to his MBA course.
I just don't think it's possible or probable in today's world to distinguish yourself as an educational institution or as a success seeker at the level of information gathering or information distribution. I mean, this is the information age, and you can get a great book, a great essay, a great idea anywhere, and none of us can do that better than the internet, right? There is no great thought leader who can outthink the internet. Like, we have data. What Alt MBA gets right is it puts you in a context where you're part of a community that says, yeah, that's good. You got access to ideas, you got access to information, that's awesome, but when are you gonna show up? When are you gonna face that blank page? When are you gonna face the possibilities within you? When are you gonna face those fears? I'm not gonna let you hide. You gotta show up. And that's the hardest part. And it sounds simple, it sounds very commonsensical, but it's the number one reason why we don't write that book. It's the number one reason why we don't ask that question. It's not because we don't know or we don't have the information. We don't have an environment and we don't have a support network that makes it feel like showing up is possible for me. Not just possible for the success stories I see out there, but I can show up.
Consider the
I think you have an idea of how that little clip like literally bleeds through the pain that we both experience in this class together, right?
Right.
I find it hard to believe, and this is directly relevant because you are ramping up to become it. Is your ideal role an SI?
I'm not applying as a supplemental instructor. I'm applying to be a peer advisor.
Peer advisor. Okay, great. Well, I think this is still worth sharing because to be a good peer advisor, we really have to understand the needs of students. So this taxonomy is from a book called Significant Learning Experiences by Fink. And so often we have noticed time and time again, our classes focus on these two slices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what do you think about my annotation skills? A solid B minus?
A solid 11 out of 10.
11 out of 10. Thank you so much. I got to pay you for that. But the problem with focusing the very little bit of shared class time that we have on only these two slices is that, another way to put this, have you ever taken a CS class and math class and then was able to apply those concepts immediately to your life to add tremendous value?
Absolutely not.
No, right? And that's my contention with the system. We market these classes, or we market our degrees and credentials to be that if we get them, then we'll become valuable or employable, right? But like it's hard for me to believe it's the information. Yes, there's a scarcity of good information, right? In other words, if there's a textbook that can teach me CS from page 0 to 200, then I'm in the gold, right? I wouldn't be struggling. But it's the fact that those textbooks are written with a lot of constraints and assumptions, where there's no through line, and in other words, good information is scarce, right? But focusing the little bit of shared class time that we have on information delivery, I think is out of date. Because if you literally transcribe all of the words that are delivered in a lecture, not much of it is retained, right? So then the assumption is, well, we take notes and we document it and we capture it. But that's not always the case. And even if you were to transcribe all the words that are presented in a lecture, it's probably less than 10 pages of material, right? Which is nothing compared to the amount of the research that we got to do anyway to succeed in these assessments and projects. Like we're going to have to be reading like 50 plus. So in other words, when we're talking about feeling alone, right, in these courses, when we don't think about how to address that problem, we'll never address that problem. Right. So I am aware, like in the class that we're in, we're going to have a group project somewhere down the line. And one can say, yeah, that is definitely an earnest attempt at addressing the problem. But one of the reasons why you're withdrawing from that course, and one of the reasons why I am getting my butt kicked in this class, is we had no idea what we signed up for, right? Mm-hmm. It's invisible to us. Like even if we saw the syllabus ahead of time, it is kind of invisible. Anyways, I'll let you go ahead and speak to the idea of feeling alone in courses.
Yeah, there's such a lack of community when it comes to computer science. We already have this mentality that we have to only rely on ourselves to be the best. And if you try to help someone else succeed, they might turn around and trample you. That's the mindset we have for CS, rather than trying to uplift everyone together and make sure everyone passes. One of the things I'm trying to do to try to mitigate the wounds that come from being such an individual in CS is the Discord servers for intro to programming, they help each other, right? They help each other learn, but I also try to open up space for them to ask me questions, to give me feedback, to have me help them with their concerns. I want them to know that there are people who have gone through this and survived and can help you now. And that's community building. When we don't have community building, it's hard to succeed at all. Even if you get a good grade in a class, are you really succeeding?
Yeah, keep going, keep going. I'm just keep thinking through that.
Yeah, so like in our class, I feel like it would have been beneficial if we just took the last 30 minutes of class every day, last 30 to 15 minutes, to just talk about the lecture, talk about what we don't understand, what we do understand, and help each other fill in gaps of knowledge. Because we as humans rely on each other. We rely on each other to keep ourselves safe, to meet our needs, to make sure we survive and thrive. Understand something, someone else will understand it. And if someone can't explain to us, someone else will be able to. It's just being able to create that community that we rely on. And ultimately, a lot of these relationships we can take and grow with even after the class, especially if you're in the same major, right? A lot of them are going to be people of different ages, and we'll have very valuable life experiences to share with each other and make sure we're all thriving.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. This semester for me, I've been shadowing Jeff's courses, my mentor and advisor from Foothill Community College. And it is so enlightening to see what he's doing. Literally, he meets with like individual teams of students. Like he sets up these teams on like week one, right? And then the entire classroom is flipped. Like all of there's pre-recorded lecture, there's pre-recorded information delivery, with quite high video production, not just Zoom, which is like Zoom is great, right? I mean, think about when our teachers had to go through their undergrad. They probably did not have recorded lectures, so they're probably experiencing more pain than we are. But on the same side of that, like recorded lectures don't help as much as students bank them on helping. I think it's painful the first time. How is it going to be any different the second time? Anyways, yes, there's so many ways to kind of address that. How do we get students not to feel lonely problem, right? Like really authentic ways. And I'm sharing here 6 of the major core themes from the learning code. And there's a reason why theme 1 is first, right? Build your learning team with effective help-seeking practices. And there's also this idea of values in some of these themes. That's subtle, but yeah, I have a lot to say on this idea. But I think, the Department of Sociology and the career that you design for yourself is going to be awesome regardless, right? What would you like to talk about, Jace? What's on your mind?
Mostly what's been on my mind in recent days is how do I get support to people who need it? Because there's been many tragic things happening recently. in January, I think January 26th, don't quote me on the date, I'm terrible at dates. David Tovar was killed by SJSU police in a neighborhood apartment complex that was filled with kids. Just the lack of community that we have in our structural systems is very painful to see. The police aren't part of our community, and they are affecting the communities they're trying to serve. So what I've been trying to do as a mental health ambassador is see if I can get youth mental health first aid training out to the affected families so they can best support their children or other kids in that area. Because if we don't give people resources to be able to heal from trauma, they're going to turn around and hurt other people because they don't know how else to express their feelings. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening in CS, right? People become really jaded because they don't have community to fall on, and they turn around and try to prevent other people from getting community. Hurt people, and it perpetrates a cycle that's hard to break unless someone decides to take that step and start to break it down and get other people to help them break it down, right?
Yeah. Personnel ultimately becomes policy, right? Whether it is you're in law enforcement, whether it is you're an educator or a social worker, when we enter those spaces, we kind of get to read in between the lines, right? In other words, one teacher with tenure can use that tenure power to really advocate for system transformation and empowering their students.
Mm-hmm.
And another one with tenure might focus more of their efforts on publishing research in the field, right? Where I genuinely feel the most demanding research problems I've dealt with in my life are the ones in students' lives, right? Are the ones with the people that we work with. Yeah, you mentioned the idea of trauma. That's a real one. I haven't done this book justice yet. I've just read a bunch of summaries. But the reason I have it is to do right by young folks as a peer educator that we both are, and mentor. We have to have a well to kind of draw that soul or love from, right? Otherwise, if our well is empty, it's going to be really difficult to do right by young folks.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I can speak on this. Like, I could have become a Peers in Pride mentor last year instead of this year, but I specifically chose to hold off because I know I needed to work on myself, or else I wouldn't have the capacity to give to other people. And recognizing these limitations of yourself is very important, especially.
Jace, you cut out a little bit. Oh, no. Okay, I guess Jace just texted me that her internet is out, so to be continued.